Hello friend, welcome back to my kitchen and welcome back to Heritage Homestead. If you happen to have missed the latest video, I announced that I was going to change the name for this channel. I'm hoping that having Homestead in the name allows people to instantly get a sense of what the channel is about and what they can expect here. So I'm happy to be welcoming you to Heritage Homestead. After a busy summer and fall of growing and preserving food, I'm happy now to be cooking from the food that I've stored. I'm doing the Three Rivers Challenge right now, and if you're not familiar with it, it's a 2-month challenge that involves not grocery shopping at all. But fortunately, the host encourages people to create their own rules and make the challenge work for them. I'm not at the point where I'm ready to go 2 months without grocery shopping. We don't have that much food stored up, but we do have a good amount of food that I want to make sure I'm using before the next gardening season. So my modified challenge is that I'm allowing myself to spend $60 a week on groceries. If you've grocery shopped anytime recently, you know that $60 doesn't go very far right now, but it's enough that I can get the bananas that my son expects for breakfast and some fresh fruit and things like that, and then still cook using meats from our freezer and canned goods from our shelves. And so it feels really good to be working through all the things that we need to be using. Tonight is a burger and fries night. I'm using my favorite burger patty recipe here. I'll link it below. It calls for some breadcrumbs and we're gluten-free, so I'm using King Arthur measure for measure flour instead of the breadcrumbs. I find that this just helps to hold some of the moisture in the burgers and kind of makes them plump and full. We also have an egg allergy in our house. My daughter's allergic to eggs, so I skip that in the burger patty recipe. I love the sound of burgers frying. I'm so glad that we're able to make burgers inside when it's not good grilling weather. We've got some cheese in the fridge. This is some dill cheese that I don't like very much, and it needs to be used up. It's been sitting around for a while, so I thought it'd be pretty good melted over a patty. Then for dessert tonight, I'm setting out a can of our own applesauce. I'd be lying if I said our desserts are always this wholesome. My kids have been eating a lot of candy. It seems like Halloween to Thanksgiving to Christmas is just constant candy. So we're trying to rein things in a little bit by doing some fruit for dessert now.
Did you do it?
These pickles are from the garden and they're perfect for a burger night. My pickle video was my most viewed video this year, so I feel really grateful for them as we're eating them, knowing that I got to share that process with all of you and that they're going to feed my family throughout the winter. I realize that a bunless burger isn't exactly eye candy for a video, but that's our regular and we've come to love it. So this was just a treat meal for the family. It's one of those that nobody complains about, and that's a win for me. I roast a chicken about once a week because I love how a roasted chicken feeds us for a couple days with the broth and the leftover meat. I usually stuff the cavity of the chicken with lemon and garlic. I leave the peel on these because they're just going to infuse the meat with some flavor as they cook. On the outside of the bird, I pour some melted butter. The milk solids in the butter help the skin get nice and crispy as it roasts. And then this is where I vary things. Sometimes I keep it simple and do salt and pepper on the outside. Sometimes I do herbs. Today I'm doing thyme and rosemary from the garden. Sometimes I also do different seasoning blends, like a fajita seasoning blend or a Creole seasoning blend. It's nice to be able to just adapt the seasoning to whatever else we want to eat with our meal. When I first started roasting chickens, the bake time was the hardest thing for me to master because chickens come in all different sizes, and sometimes I'd overbake and dry things out, sometimes I'd underbake and we'd find raw meat in the middle. Now I just consistently follow the basic formula of baking at 425 with 15 minutes of bake time per every pound of bird, and it consistently comes out good that way. With our roasted chicken, we're going to have some mashed turnips tonight. I have never made turnips before, and I didn't grow these. My brother grew them. He'd asked if we wanted some, and when someone offers me fresh produce, I always say yes. But they've been sitting in the fridge for probably 2 months now as I tried to figure out how I'm going to use them. This, to me, is exactly what the Pantry Challenge is for. It's that chance to dig into the odd things in the fridge, the freezer, the pantry that have been sitting around, and you just need to figure out how to use it. After looking around at several recipes online, I found one that looked really good. It uses 2 parts turnips to 1 part potato, and I think that helps to calm down some of the sharpness of the turnip flavor, plus adding some butter and cream doesn't hurt either. I was pleasantly surprised. These were really tasty. For a veggie tonight, we're having frozen green beans from the garden. There's probably a more elegant way to do this, but I just stick the whole frozen block in a pan with a bit of water and let them thaw, and then add some salt along with olive oil.
Did you know, Jamie, that you're going to the farm show tomorrow?
No, what's a farm? Oh.
It's a good tune.
After a roast chicken night, John always takes the meat off the bones. For some reason, that's my least favorite part, and so he does this for me. And then the carcass goes into the crock pot along with some water and cooks on low overnight to make a really good broth. I used to add a little bit of vinegar at this point because I've been told that it pulls nutrients out of the bones, but I just don't like the way it flavors the broth a bit. So this is just bones and water. The next morning there's a good rich broth sitting in the crock pot, so now I'm going to put this in a container to store for tomorrow. I'll make soup with it tomorrow. And for today, I'm going to put the bones back in the crock pot and do a second round of broth. That second round is always weaker, so I make sure to label my containers. CB1 for the first round of chicken broth, and then CB2 will be the second round. That second round is something I use for things like cooking rice, not necessarily for making soup. Tonight with the leftover chicken, we're having chicken and rice bowls. I really like having rice bowls because I like setting out a lot of different ingredients and everyone can personalize their own meal. My kids are not excited about jalapenos and salsa, but I am. So we all put together the right pieces for ourselves with these meals and it works out great. I'm using that second round of broth as the cooking liquid for the rice. This packs in some extra nutrients and some extra flavor. I'm going to do a take on Spanish rice tonight, so I'm adding some tomato paste, and then this will also get some salt, garlic powder, and onion powder before it goes into the rice cooker. We like having some caramelized peppers and onions with our chicken and rice bowls. So these are some frozen peppers from the garden. I wish these were our own onions, but we actually ran out of onions about a month ago. So I'm making a note for this year's garden that I definitely need to grow more onions. And this is the moment where I discovered my cumin bottle does not have that top on it that allows the cumin to sprinkle. So it poured out, but fortunately this is salvageable. I'm just chopping up last night's chicken, and then I'm adding some fajita seasoning blend. I always keep a few seasoning blends on the pantry shelf, so these things come together quickly.
Somewhere like you're trapped.
Finally, we have a few bananas that have been sitting out on the counter and are now black, so I decided we'll have some banana bread for dessert tonight. This is some measure for measure flour from King Arthur because we're gluten-free. I'll put this recipe down below.
The mess we got from the farm, so. Banana.
Hey, cuties. I just love it.
Well, we're actually a person. And
Oh.
Instead of cane sugar, I'm using maple sugar here. I brought you along a couple weeks ago for picking up that sugar from my Azure order. I'm also substituting applesauce for eggs because my daughter has an egg allergy. So there's a lot of substitutions in this recipe, but it still came out pretty tasty.
Is it my turn?
It will be the next time.
Salt and
Can I do
Good.
it?
shovel the driveway.
Yes. Halfway. Maybe 3 or 4 clicks. That's
One
good.
more?
Hold on.
When is it?
We're done now, Bella.
A couple days ago, I peeped into the cold frame and was surprised to discover that I have Swiss chard growing. I closed this lid maybe around Thanksgiving as things got colder, and I was just kind of feeling done with the garden and didn't water it, didn't touch it, didn't look at it. So I assumed everything inside was dead, but not so. We actually have greens growing. Another benefit to the pantry challenge. I find things I didn't know I had. So I'm going to put these in a soup tonight and enjoy the little bonus of a surprise harvest in January. I'm just cooking some ground pork here. We keep this stocked in the freezer from a local farmer. I find that pastured pork is leaner than what I get from the store, so this doesn't have quite as much oil as what I get from the store. So I don't drain this after I cook it. And I like to add in seasonings because it is pretty simple on its own. So we've got garlic powder, onion powder, and oregano from the garden going in. Once it's cooked through, I'm adding some onions along with some garlic. This is the broth we made from Monday's chicken, so this is the third and final meal that I'm going to get out of that chicken. I really love how a whole chicken just keeps on giving. This soup is loosely based on a recipe I found online. I never can stick closely to a recipe when it comes to something like soup. Soup is just so flexible, and I like using what I have on hand, but I'll put that link down below. These are some of our own canned potatoes. It's so nice that things can come together really quickly when the potatoes are already cooked. So as I'm waiting for this to come up to a boil, I'm just going to prep the greens because they'll be wilted in the soup once it comes to a boil. And I'm also going to make a slurry of heavy cream and cornstarch. Once the soup comes to a boil, that slurry will go in and that'll thicken the soup and make it thicker and nice and creamy. Tonight I'm cooking by request. My daughter has been asking for a spaghetti and meatballs night. I haven't made meatballs in a while, and it sounds good to me. So I'm making my own meatball recipe here. I usually make a double or triple batch when I make meatballs because it's just not that much harder and they reheat really well. So I'm making a double batch now. I've got ground pork and ground beef in here and some basic seasonings. I'm putting in some measure for measure flour in place of breadcrumbs. Just like with the hamburger, I like the way that breadcrumbs, or here flour alternative, holds in some of the moisture from the fat and keeps it from cooking out, and it kind of makes things just plump and a good texture. I don't like to season my meatballs with Italian seasoning for a spaghetti night because, like I said, I'm making a double batch, so I like using really neutral seasonings, and that way the next time that we eat them, if I want to prepare them a totally different way, like a Swedish meatball night, I can. This spaghetti sauce is from the batch that I canned with my parents 2 summers ago, and I brought you along for that project. But I'm reminded as I'm pouring this into the pan that I still have all of my paste tomatoes from the summer garden in the freezer right now, still waiting to be processed. I got overwhelmed in the summer and just froze them and thought I'd take care of it when the gardening season's over, and now it's long over. I think I'll probably try to take care of that next week. But in the meantime, I'm grateful that we still have good sauce. This Jovial brand gluten-free spaghetti is the best gluten-free pasta I've found. I stick with this brand for all of our pasta, and I'm just grateful that we have something that doesn't have a strange texture. The texture is a lot like pasta. I'm also making some roasted broccoli tonight. That's not from the garden. That's one of the few things that I shopped for this week. I'm looking forward to the return of garden fresh broccoli in just a few months. I don't know about you, but sometimes by the end of the week, I have just run out of enthusiasm for cooking. This is one of those nights, and so we're doing something completely different tonight. We don't do this often, but I've got a bunch of frozen fruit, some peaches from a local orchard from the summer, and some bananas and raspberries. And so, as a treat for the kids and a break for us, we're doing a smoothies and popcorn night. We get our popcorn from Azure. We like to make it in the air popper, and we have some good butter that gets melted while the popcorn pops. I'm getting better at doing things one-handed these days. Baby girl is teething and just doesn't want to be put down right now.
Good buttery popcorn. It's the best of the year.
Popcorn purists, this is probably not an approved move, but there never seems to be enough butter to coat all that popcorn, and I want the salt to have something to stick to. So I use a little olive oil in there as well.
Careful, it's pretty full.
We add nuts and toppings to our smoothie bowls. My personal favorite is coconut flakes and almonds. As an added treat, the family got to enjoy dinner and a TV show tonight. Saturday's dinner was the easiest dinner yet, even easier than smoothies and popcorn. Tonight we're using one of my meals in a jar, so I'm starting off with some Jovial brand penne pasta, and then I'm opening up my beef stroganoff meal in a jar, so that just needs to go into the pan and be heated. I'll put a link below if you're interested in seeing how I made this beef stroganoff, but it is perfect for these nights when I just don't feel like spending a lot of time in the kitchen. This is the last of the Swiss chard that we picked earlier in the week, and I'm just putting a little cornstarch and heavy cream slurry into the beef stroganoff to thicken it. This beef stroganoff was the last one-jar meal that I had on my shelf. I typically use about one of these a week, so that means I'm due for another canning day. I'll probably bring you along for that. Thank you for joining me and my family for our week of dinners. It really is comforting to know that we can use this food that we've preserved and set aside for ourselves, and that means that we're coming up on the beginning of another gardening season. I wish you all the best this week.